So I want to get started straight into this interview. So just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, your history, who you are, who is Marcus.
Okay, I'm Marcus. I'm from London. I've lived here my whole life. I recently, well, I say recently, I started dressing more historically about 2015, and then last year I randomly discovered that there was like loads of other people who also dress in historical.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I joined in with them. Yeah,
You
it's been
have to
unusual.
invite me one of these days. You have to.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're doing something. Well, we've got something on this Thursday. I haven't got all the details through yet.
Yeah.
That's the interesting one. It's less social. It's more of basically it's a bit of an action to try and keep
Mm,
this restaurant open. I can give you all
yes.
the details.
Oh,
Um,
please.
and we're also planning something for Christmas, but again, that hasn't been sorted out as yet. But more than welcome to come.
I would love to. I would love to. And that's interesting because when I met you at my artist talk in Greenwich, I loved your attire, the whole apparel. You had the tailcoat, the top hat, even the cane. And so, I mean, I think you answered my second question off the bat. Was I just wanted to say when did 18th century apparel become a lifestyle to you? Because I thought when you were coming, it was just like a one day dress up or a cosplay. But when did it become a lifestyle?
It was something I was always interested in my whole life. Even as a kid, I was always quite drawn to the 19th century aesthetic. But I think the big turning point is because I illustrate as well, and I was working on a 19th century set comic book. And one of the big things I wanted to do was to have authentic clothing in it. I feel that oftentimes when you're looking at something set in the 19th century, people just do bow ties
Okay,
and
so I just said 18th century when I should have you specified
that's,
19th century.
that's all right.
It's fine. Okay. That's good. That's good. I mean, I just find it so interesting. I didn't think these people would exist, people who, casually dressed in period clothing and have events and go out to maybe a nice day in Corby or a special historical location together. That I really would enjoy that. I've never met a community. It feels like almost like my community is calling me because I don't get to express my 18th century clothing really anywhere except for if I'm doing a photo shoot for my artwork. I don't just walk out.
I've got a friend who's very big in his 18th century clothing, and he's been looking for people to go around with.
Oh, really? I would love to try out a day in that and just see how, but I'm far, I'm not mostly, I'm really interested in 18th century men's fashion. I
Oh
would
yeah,
like totally go out in a tailcoat, waistcoat, maybe add some heels, but literally like the tailcoat and the waistcoat, the cravat, everything. I just love men's fashion. Like I love women's fashion, like ball gowns, like it's on, it's amazing. But I'm not sure if I would have the capacity to just walk out in a gigantic ball gown. As lavish as they were, I just I just love the men's clothing because I think it's like unique for a woman to come in the men's fashion, and I think it's nicer to rock because it has like a edge to it because nowadays back in the days women didn't wear trousers, we only wore skirts, petticoats, anything that was gown, and it's like a mix of contemporary but yet keeping it old school at the same time. That's the kind of vibe I
absolutely.
kind of get, and that's what my artwork is all about anyway. So I would definitely, if you could recommend me to like any events or anything that's going on, I will find that so cool. But it brings me to my third question. Do you feel any sense of stigma that the Black community often feels towards 18th, 19th century British history? Is that something
Um,
you feel? personally.
I don't get that from British black people. I have had it from American black people actually.
Yes.
Yeah, with British black people, they're just like, "Oh, hey, rude boy, you know deep man, that's heavy." Um, but
Oh,
the Americans, they tend to say, "Oh, oh, why are you dressed like a slave owner? Why are you dressed like this?" And
oh my God.
my response is, "I'm not. I'm dressed like a congressman. I'm dressed like a senator. I'm dressed like a lawyer."
Yes. It's very important that you pointed that out to them, I think, because I feel and I've come across, that the Black community feels a certain stigma, like a distance towards, especially, 18th century British history, because they feel like they have no representation, they have no part or no role in it. And it's funny to me when they
Well,
feel like that because I've created a whole, a community, a page that portrayed, that revealed existing figures that had their own autonomy, that had, the kind of clothes that you're dressed in now. They were dressing like this in their time, and they were, well-to-do people with very smart and, I prefer 18th century attire to the attire of nowadays. It's much more classy. It has much more elegance and class. We've lost our sense of class and taste in 2022, the contemporary world, when it was very, very strong in the 18th and 19th century. And when, African Americans come to you and ask why are you dressed as a slave owner, that to me feels like there's a lot of stigma and misunderstanding between actual history. If you look at historical figures, even like James Forten, he was an African American millionaire who owned a sail loft worth millions and a pioneer in his time. And Paul Cuffey, also, a captain owning a sail loft business. These African Americans were pioneers. If you look at the kind of clothes they were wearing, and if we just go down to British history and we see the wealthy pioneers of then, like Oluwa Ekwano, Ignatius Sancho, the kind of clothes, the kind of attire that they wear, you seem to remind me of these kind of existing. You draw attention to, like, not a fantasy history, but a real life, history that seems to be lost to the Black community, and we have this stigma where we feel like we are not, we don't we're not belonging in these spaces, in these communities. So I always wanted to just have your perspective on that, and I can never ever understand.
it's something that I was raised on with like history. The only history we're taught is the Egyptians, slavery, Martin Luther
Yeah.
King, and
Oh my gosh.
that's the only space we occupy. So yeah, for me, it was a real voyage of discovery, realizing that no, we actually are in other places. Black people weren't
It's
invented
true.
in the 1960s. We were existing and living our lives and doing all sorts of things.
If only
Yeah,
I could communicate that to some people in America, that, they're just like, their history begins 400 years ago. It hurts me that this happens.
I,
But
I think that slavery as a cultural touch point is hugely important.
yeah,
If for no other reason then it's still relevant in modern life.
mhm,
It's something that we are reminded of, and we still feel the repercussions of it. So it's still something that is something that is important today. But alongside that is who we were before slavery. I am fascinated by the idea that we were people. Just
yeah,
we just were for hundreds of years. We were
that's a
just
great
living our
response.
lives all over the place,
Totally.
having wars, getting married,
Having wars.
coming up with new ideas, creating art, writing, traveling, exploring
Amazing.
the world. We're doing all this stuff. And
Yeah,
there is a great deal of erasure following chattel slavery. And
yeah,
I really want to re-energize that. Because human beings have been around for 200,000 years. Most of that
yeah.
time they've been black. So I'd like to actually sort of find out more about that.
It's very, it's refreshing to hear this perspective, because the perspective I often get is that the Black community want to they want to, suppress the extent of what our history could be, and confine it to just the transatlantic slave trade in such a short period of history that is only what 200 300 years. And when the transatlantic slave trade itself is something that's been going on for thousands of years. Sorry, I'm gonna sneeze.
Well,
But
I think it's about the impact. Again, it's the impact that it's having today. For example, if you want to talk about my cultural history or anything like that, my cultural history, my family's from Jamaica. It only goes back a few generations. I don't have a real language. All we have is a dialect. We don't
yeah.
really have a culture. It's borrowed from all these other cultures. It's
Hmm.
a thing where I don't really have any idea of common ancestry, of roots. I think I'm quite lucky in that I'm a Jamaican because I can actually go back a few generations. But beyond that, there's nothing there. And
It's
I
true,
think
yeah.
when you look at history, as it's commonly taught, you go to museums, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And in fact, what most museums do is they will tie their culture to older cultures in very clear ways. For example, you'll have the British Empire, you'll have the Second World War, you'll have the all going back, all through all the kings, going back to
Yeah.
William,
Oh, yeah.
and then they'll keep going over to Italy, and there'll be and then the Romans. It's like you're completely different people, but they've made this common thread. There is this idea that
Yeah.
if an English person hopped into a time machine, they could go anywhere and find their people.
Anyway.
So
Yeah, I see
we
where this
don't
is
have
going.
that. I mean, we
Yeah.
have the cliche of black people can't time travel. Yeah, we can, but
Yeah. Yeah. Let's make that a thing.
black people can time travel. Obviously, avoid the antebellum South. But I mean, for most of world history, you can go where you like.
It's absolutely true, because it's what you said is so pertinent and so important for the Black community to hear, not just in the UK, but especially in America, because what my page highlights is that this the term black, even that term, that stems from race, which was a social construct that was developed in the 17th century. Is There is more to our identity than just race. We could say, before, people were saying black and white and yellow. You know, we were identifying to ourselves by ethnicity. So, a Senegalese girl, an Eritrean man. So, for example, the Black Russian general, who went on to having a very big legacy in Russia, and his children went on to be aristocrats and generals. He came from the land of Eritrea, in Africa. So it's very specific where he came from. It's very specific where a lot of these African, that's why I don't just say, sometimes I try not to say Black Europeans, but it's so engraved in our culture that I find it hard to stray from the word Black. So I have to use that to kind of bring attention to the culture, but in the same time, I'm trying to distance them from the idea of social construct that just sees you as anything. You're only Black, nothing else but Black. You don't have, ethnicity, you don't have a religion, you don't have a character, you don't have interest, you're just Black, and that's it. And so I want to just remind, the Black community, which we call ourselves, that we are more than just our skin color. We have different interests, we have a character, we have different political views,
Yeah.
and it's just one thing saying Black and white, another form of construct that helps divide communities, and it hasn't been very helpful especially for the African American community, who I feel they're living in a bubble, because when they refer to history, they only refer to it from the lens of America, what was going on in America, and what was going on throughout the rest of the world. So I feel it's very important to make sure that Black history, when it comes to it, when we make our Black History Month, should not be just synonymous to
It's
slavery,
almost,
when there's so much more.
it's almost, it's almost entirely American centric, and it's interesting because a lot of a lot of these figures that you find in Black history, and this isn't a detriment, it just sort of
And
highlights
see,
how
I
common it
love
is.
American
A lot
history
of
as
the you'll
well, but
see
I just
son of a
feel
slave, you'll see son of a slave or former slave, da, 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 da. And it's like that immediately identifies it's that one corner. Why aren't we hearing a lot more about Shaka Zulu in Black history? One of the great military minds
yeah.
of any time. Um, I actually was with a friend. We were just walking and talking, and he was talking about great generals, and he was like, because he's very into his military history. And I said to him, oh, well, yeah, what about Shaka Zulu? I heard he was quite good. And he proceeded to talk for about 5 or 6 minutes about Shaka Zulu. And I learned more in those 5 or 6 minutes than
Wow.
and I studied A level. I studied history right up until A level. I learned more in those 5 minutes than I ever had in the 8 years prior.
That's
You know,
amazing. Yeah.
but it's there. This is the frustrating thing is that it's made difficult to find, and um,
Yes.
it's an
It's
image.
made very
There's
difficult.
an image of blackness that is, I think,
Yeah.
reinforced. We have. It's the only identity we have, and it's an identity that is forged through common trauma. Um,
Mhm.
so on the one hand, we have this togetherness, we have this, we know each other. But on the other hand, the only reason we know each other is because we survived something horrific.
Mhm.
There's no
In
joy.
between. Yeah.
There's nothing beyond that. It's just you've been hurt, I've been hurt, we both know. You know,
Yeah.
and I think it's vital to find a connection that is beyond that, and also to indulge in our differences.
Mm.
I'm going to bring up a film that I think everyone probably has watched at some point, which is Black Panther.
Yep.
Um,
It's coming. We all
of
know.
course,
Black Panther. Here we go.
but it did so many great things. It is a very average superhero film. It doesn't do
Yeah.
anything useful, but the world it shows, that is what no one outside the black community quite gets why we're all obsessed with it. It's not because it's a great film, it's because of
Yeah.
what it showed. It
Yeah.
showed people who had a history, had a
Wow.
culture, and also
Yeah.
different people. They were from different nations. They were
Hmm.
coming together and they were like, you're from this country, you're from that country.
Yeah.
It was the kind of thing that you would see in Lord of the Rings. It's the kind of thing that you would see. It is, because everyone had a solid identity.
Yeah.
And each was as important as the other. They were a diverse group of people, and they came together not because of suffering, but because
Hmm.
of common cause and common interests.
Empowerment. Yeah.
And that was yeah. Well, it wasn't even empowerment because they were powerful. They didn't need to
Yeah.
get power; they had it, which I think which was made it such a seductive film, and why it's so well loved because it's like, oh God,
Yeah.
that's what we should be.
That's what we, yeah, that's very good because it reinforces a psychology that seems to be missing in actually existing histories that always seem to enforce the negative psychology when we go back to the traumas of, when very the colloquial of Black histories, our ancestors, 400 years, the trauma, plantation, slavery, these kind of words. And when we hear these again and again, it kind of makes us more and more desensitized, either desensitized to relearning, discovering the same kind of narratives every single Black History Month, to the point where we don't think of our history as anything else. We just think, oh yeah, here we go, slavery again, a plantation. Yeah, we know that. Okay, MLK. Okay, great. Yeah, Mandela. Okay, yeah, we know. And it's regurgitation. It's
It's,
literally like it's making me gag sometimes because
it's
it is
very
nothing new to the curriculum.
it's a very important narrative that needs to be enforced and needs to be, reiterated by people who are happy to maintain this particular paradigm. It is important that Black people know about their suffering, but nothing else. It's why we're constantly having these Oscar bait films, which I call Black suffering films. It's always about a maid. It's always about a maid or a servant or someone on the sidelines And the film's
Oh,
not even about them ever. It's all about the white person and how they react to the black problem. It was like
black
I remember
suffering
watching,
film.
that's what that
Yeah.
is for. It's just the entire point of these films is so that an actor can get an Oscar for how upset he is about the black plight. They're not even black themselves; they're just really upset about it.
I mean, yeah, to some degree, yeah, you have a point because it, as much as I understand their plight in making the film and trying to enforce, real truths which were very hard, are kind of hard for us to swallow in the 21st century, it feels like it's a common practice now where if you the greater victim you can be in a film, the more endorsed it will be, and the more Grammy awards you will get for playing the role, instead of acknowledging actual truths to a nuanced history that maybe doesn't make it seem as popular or receivable for us today. For example, we love Woman King, right? And we love the history of Dahomey. We love that kind of regality in Africa. But what we don't love is that the fact that the Dahomean king, the Dahomean people were slave traders. They were very active in the slave trade, and they didn't want to give up. And they were actually told, like, "Hey," by the British, like, "Hey, you need to stop the slave trade." But then again, from that perspective, they're portrayed as reluctant abolitionists, and then we only see one side of the Dahomey that makes us feel okay. Well, they did want to kind of end slavery. No, they didn't even want to kind of end it. Like we if we want
I
to go
mean,
deep enough into
we have the same. I think we have the same thing with the British slave trade.
yeah
Common narrative we're told is that William Wilberforce stopped it because it was bad. We're not told about the Maroons. We're not told about the fact that
yeah
increasing mechanization was shrinking profit margins for slavery. We're
hmm
not told about the fact that constant slave rebellions were making it pretty difficult to keep maintaining it. We're not told about the fact that Haiti, or then San Domingo, overthrew their masters and
yeah
were taking out an independent country. I think what you're saying there with the woman king and them not wanting to give up their slavery is a good point. But I also think that's very often what we're seeing with the British slavery narrative. I mean,
yeah
you take a walk out in any upmarket street in London, and a slave owner built it. This entire
yeah
country has built, entire
um,
cities and industries were built on
yeah
slavery. But the idea that we're commonly told is, yeah, but when we realized it was wrong and we put a stop to it. It's like,
yeah
yeah, it took you a while.
Mhm.
You only did it when it stopped being possible. And then you were actually helping other countries maintain slavery as well on the seas.
Yeah,
So,
that's the nuanced thing about Britain. It's like we want to accept, oh yeah, we Britain, we're the abolitionists, but at the same time, look how much wealth um and status. I mean the buildings. Look how much
Britain made
things have been
slavery
provided.
cool. Britain made slavery cool. They were the ones who showed all the other European countries just how much
Mm,
money could be
yeah,
made from.
it's Yeah, and it's a great evil that you can have, the British, you can have those, yeah, William Wilberforce, who were
Yeah,
abolitionists, Olaudah Equiano, again, one of the abolitionists, and then at the same time have a group of people who wanted to maintain the slave trade that was happening, especially as Africans were introduced to it. They introduced at the same time, clung it together almost, the concept of race, to make sure that people accepted African slavery and diminished their conscience to see Africans as
so
just
interesting.
cattle.
I thought that was instant. I thought as soon as the transatlantic slave trade happened, the idea of black and white was inaugurated. Um,
Yeah,
but apparently not. Now, I know you often hear this from other people
yeah,
going, oh, the Irish were slaves, which is true. There
yeah,
was also indentured servitude as well.
yes,
What was commonly happening was you were having black and white slaves working together. And then there was
yeah.
a thing which I only discovered, I think, last year, something called the Bacon Rebellion, where black and white slaves got together, overthrew their masters. Not exactly. And then after that, there were a bunch of laws brought in, which in the letter of the law was defining people by white and black, and it was very important. You know, black
Oh,
people aren't allowed to marry white people. Black people aren't
yeah.
allowed to own guns. Black
Yeah,
people
yeah, yep.
and white
And
slaves.
you can see that reflection in America as well.
Well, this is where I think
Wow.
this is where um, this was the stronghold of race. I think
Yeah,
it wasn't the beginning of it, but I think this was really where it was solidified and made
mm,
absolutely concrete that black people were separate and not equal. And yeah, it was a beautiful way of stopping people who had the same um, background, the same problems, and the same needs. It
yeah,
was a good way of separating them by giving
yeah,
these indentured servants a modicum of more power. They basically
yeah,
handed them a whip and said, "There you go. You get to swing the whip. You're going to live in a
yeah.
hovel, but you get to swing the whip." So
Yeah, I remember. I remember that story of the servant who actually I forgot his name who whipped a white I don't know, white slave, a white and this is actually inside of my page, so if you want to go check it out. But it's like the indentured servitude, the African Europeans as servants here in this nation, and then having the slaves, and then having the wealthy Africans who were the slavers, and then just having, you know, places like Ethiopia who was never colonized, and they were not really focused on slave trading, and other nations who made money through different ways other than the slave trade. It's such a nuanced history. Like, to combine these things, we kind of would have to go back in time and actually time travel and see what life was like living in then, because judging history from our current 2022 perspective of how the world should be is kind of an unfair judgment, because we're not living in the same time
I
as
would
those
I would
people were.
refute I would refute that argument because there
Really?
were people at the time who were anti-slavery. There was lots of them.
Yeah.
The slaves didn't think it was great.
No,
There
no.
were people who were against it, and I also think you
The
would need
fact that
to come to that.
it was so universal that not much, you know, slave abolition, well, not much activism as you could see today was going on during that time. Even if we go further than the 1600s, even if we go to let's see, 145 AD, you know, when Septimius Severus, the African Roman emperor, was born, and you know the Romans were taking over the Britons, and they were enslaving British people, and they were enslaving all kinds of nations. There wasn't that much rebellion going on as far as I'm concerned. Of course, there were always anti-slavery people, but it seems like their voice were lost in the overwhelming
I,
majority of people who wanted to upkeep slavery.
I would say the thing is that I would actually make a distinction between slavery and chattel slavery. For
Mm,
me, there is the component of race. No one came up with the idea of race really prior to chattel slavery, and that's the idea that someone is born to be a slave. That if they're not working in the fields, they're not working in a house, they are going to be animals, they're going to be starving themselves to death, they are childlike and simple, and they need to be led around by the nose, else
mm,
they're not going to be able to survive. You weren't really getting that in the past. People who were slaves in the past were, there were conquered peoples, there were peoples from nations. There was not the idea that every single person who looks like a Gaul should be a slave. It was,
mm.
and even the idea of race, it's clearly a stupid idea and makes no damn sense.
Oh,
Something
wow.
and it's constantly shifting. It's fascinating, especially even in America, even in the last 60, 70 years, race has changed. They did a census and it was for Latina people. And in the 40s, Latina people were classified as being white. And then by the 60s and 70s onwards, they were classified as being black. You have a man in Bangladesh, he's black. And yet a man in Ethiopia is the same race. And yet there's no common culture, no common ethnicity.
Huh?
It
What?
what, what?
Just like, Latinos were classed as white, and then they were classed as black.
Yeah,
That's very
in
interesting.
in old censuses. But this is the thing. Black is
Hmm.
it's not anything to do with genetics, and it's not anything to do with ethnicity. I've got a cousin who is
Hmm.
pale ginger. Um,
Hmm.
my grandfather looked like a Scotsman,
Yeah.
but he was Jamaican. He was
Yeah.
Jamaican as anything, and to me, he was black because
Yeah.
he's my grandfather. He's black, and then
Yeah.
people would meet him for the first time, and they go, "Why didn't you tell me he was white?" Because
It
it's
is
such a made
difficult,
idea.
and then but then you also have albino people. I say that the people who have a lack of melanin, but you can just tell that they're not. You know that they're black. It's like, where do we draw the line between race? Is it actually those who look or have darker skin, or is it now like it's just a concept where you perceive as black because although your skin is pale, your features are African. Where do we draw the line?
Well, look, there shouldn't be a line. The line really, people look, people have different ethnicities. To me, ethnicity is just an extended family. It's
Hmm.
all ginger people aren't a different separate race. They're just ginger.
Yeah.
It's not something that needs to be separated from the main body of humanity. Um,
Mm.
so I think notice our difference, celebrate our differences because we are different. But in terms of being defined by them, that's just it's impossible
That's,
to,
yeah,
enforce. People
exactly.
talk about the Cornish as a different race.
Yeah.
People, there's a thing about are Greeks black or white? There's a thing about are the Chinese black or white? It's funny. Someone, someone of Chinese descent, say, living and being born in London is considered black, but a man born and raised in Beijing, does he consider himself to be black?
Yeah. That thing race
Yeah.
has made it very, very contentious. The way
It's
I don't think
made
it
up.
is.
It's made up, and it's not. There is no clear,
Yeah.
defining thing.
Yeah.
It is
That's
just made
true.
up.
And that's what continually makes it difficult in the times we are. It's like there's a group of people where you can tell straight away they're black, and then there's a kind of group of people you could tell, oh wait, maybe they're black, and then there's a group of people, or maybe they're half black, or maybe they're white, or they're Asian, so maybe they're black, or they're white, or they're Latino, and it becomes so muddled up where the construct of race has not. I don't think it's helped the generation I live in. I don't think it's helped people growing up and having to come into a world where now they see race as a bigger thing than ever. Um, I didn't know what box to tick every time they said Black African or Black Caribbean because I'm like, well, I'm Afro Caribbean. I'm both. I'm half Jamaican and I'm half Sierra Leone. So which box do I tick? And for some people, it's even been worse than that. The choice has even been worse than that. But
I
it's
mean,
just,
what's the point? You don't have anyone
yeah,
asking, "Are you from the Isle of Man?" Yeah.
so
Which
true.
actually, I think, probably have a greater impact. It's a small island with not a great,
Yeah,
huge geography. They've probably got some
yeah.
unique features, but that's not important. Race, it was created as part of a hierarchy. It was a way of
Mm,
being white was
mm-hmm,
created at a club. It
mm-hmm,
was like it was something that was had prestige to it. That was the idea.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, you could be dressed in rags. You could be living in a hovel. You can have your children starving,
Mm-hmm.
but you're part of this exclusive club. And the and you were born to be a ruler.
Oh,
The only
yeah.
reason you're not a ruler is the people who are living in exactly the same circumstance as you, but they've got more melanin. It's all them, and it's a lie that has worked ever since.
Yeah, it is. I absolutely agree. I couldn't agree more. And I wish it's such a hard it's woven into the fabric of society. So it's a very hard of a thing to try and like pick out and deconstruct to understand. But I'm gonna move on to the next question, which is more now about your fashion, and I think we may have a lot of fashion enthusiasts on here. So, to all those who are period fashion enthusiasts, could you give us more information on the types of clothes and accessories that you wear, so that we maybe have the names of them or
Sure.
everything?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
today I'm wearing a regular three-piece suit. I believe it's called like a day suit, I believe. It's a sack suit or a lounge suit. It's the precursor to the suit we wear today. It's the style is late 19th century, so the 1890s. Um, so the suit that you all used to seeing nowadays, this is this is sort of what's started to come out. The idea of this outfit is that someone in the 19th century they would wear this for just a lot more casual wear. So seeing friends or just going for a walk in the park, that kind of thing. So it's not very formal, oddly enough. Um, but yeah, I can show you a bit more of it. I've got the waistcoat here, you can see.
Yeah, I'm loving the chains.
I've got a little watch today. I'm not sure if the clock is running at the moment because it's new, but well, new to me.
Oh, it
And
works. You
it,
actually have one that
it
works. I just have one
it
for
works, but
fashion.
it keeps stopping, so it keeps losing time. So I think it's got the
Oh
wrong time.
no.
You know what's wrong? I'm gonna have to take it to
So
someone.
we just keep stopping and going back in time. Tick, tick. One thing that's interesting, my sister used to collect so much vintage clocks, but the only problem is that I don't think they ever worked.
No.
But I just used it. I just used it for like for the fashion of it, for the art of it, not really to actually check, which I think is fascinating that you're doing, by the way, because I don't think I could ever actually keep a watch in time, antique watch. But tell us more, like the.
So
I
this is a recent gift actually. So I had a newer watch for the last 10 years. This was given to me on my birthday about a week or two ago. Um, and it's a little bit different. It's a lot heavier than you'd expect. I have to wind it up at the same time every night to make sure it's still ticking. It's quite loud, but in a nice way. It,
in a nice way.
but it did make me think. The world must have been full of ticking. We don't get ticking anymore. Everything's digital. But there must have
Yeah,
been a time where your watch be on your nightstand ticking away,
yeah,
from a wall would be ticking. So it's
yeah,
the thing that we've lost. Well, then you take the rough with the smooth. Nothing smells of horse anymore. Thank goodness.
yeah. All the ticking is gone now. Now, thanks to technology and the digital clocks, which are everywhere. But
I don't mind that. I'm not someone who's against sort of the modern age, but
yeah,
the more I engage in historical dress, the more I see the benefit of it. I think a lot of the way the modern world works, it's down to speed. Now, nothing wrong with speed. I think spending 4 hours washing a shirt is a nightmare, but there are there are other aspects, like this. The idea is that you're supposed to be able to do more with your day because things are going quicker. But that's not how it works. Now what we're doing is that we're doing more tasks. So we're still rushed off our feet, we're still exhausted, but we're not actually doing things just in
mm,
a expected. So for me, one of the big aspects of this dress is getting dressed. It's something where I feel like I'm putting myself together. All the pieces fit together in a particular way. They're tailored and they're made in such a way that they all make sense. So in the morning, I'm getting dressed and I'm putting myself together, and it's this lovely moment of just being in touch with yourself, which I think,
it's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, it's lovely. It's a great way of just sort of getting yourself.
I just admire it because I'm such a fashion enthusiast myself, especially well for 18th and 19th century. I used to be more for vintage fashion, like let's say 60s, 50s, but then I just threw that away. I became more interested in 18th century fashion for some reason. And that's where I took off my art theme from since 2017 and ever since. But tell us more, like the hats, the cane, and I saw you wearing some other different clothes when I met you. So people have to know like more about these things.
I have a lot of hats. I didn't intend to have so many hats, but I've got loads. Some of my favorite hats are bowler hats.
Yeah, I used to have so many as well. I had a pink one, a black one, a red one, a grey one, and they're all gone except now I have one black one left.
Where they all go?
Yeah,
Where that happened to them? Yeah, I. It's interesting because classical bowler hats, I discovered that they're quite hard. They're like you can tap them and they're almost like plastic. I don't think I've actually one of my repaired. So I don't have one on me just a second. And it'd probably take me a few minutes to ruffle about and get them. But yeah, it, it's a nice hat to sort of you're stepping out and it's not too formal. It's just meeting your mates or just going
yeah,
walk. It's a lovely hat to wear. It's it's semi-formal. It's interesting because as time went by and the top hat went out of fashion, the bowler hat became incredibly formal. So it's funny how it shifted. It was one of the main hats, basically, of I'd say probably from when it was first developed. I can't remember what decade it was now, the 60s, I think, 1860s, right up until the 90s. Everyone was
yeah,
doing it. But yeah, what I would say is it's interesting because people think of it as being a very fancy thing. For instance, in the Wild West, that was the most common hat. People think of cowboy hats. No, they're
it's
all
so
wearing.
true. I
Yeah.
remember Top Cat with the top hats all the time. Like it was a fancy dress to have these and the tailcoat together with the tailcoat.
Oh, I love the tailcoat. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
fascinated with the tailcoat. Again, for me, there's this common idea of it just sort of being this weird little sort of the tail stick out the end and there's nothing on the front.
yeah,
There's loads of different versions. It's the frock coat. And for most of the 19th century, the most common version was one that was full skirted, so it was just right way around the front, and that was your business suit is what you would wear that for. You'd wear a black one,
hmm,
and it was always black, single-breasted or double-breasted. You had a velvet collar or no velvet collar, but it was always black. And in terms of trousers, you could kind of go a bit mad. You could, this is the funny
kind
thing
of
about it,
go
is
a bit
that
mad.
you would looking at it from the outside, um, tailcoats all look pretty much the same. But once you actually start understanding how they work and sort of all these little
Oh,
different nuances, and you start realizing there's all these little differences here and there.
yeah. Because I'm
Yeah,
sure they're all slightly different. I've never seen the telco that's exactly the tailoring, the curves that they have, where this curves stop and where they start. Have you ever met the Ritz waiters? They all dressed in 18th century waiting clothing, and there's a little bit that comes up like that's really just below the bust, and then it's like you can see the waistcoat inside, and I just think it looks so elegant, but it's like very high waisted, like coming up there. I wish I could show you, but
well,
it just looks so
I found that
elegant.
this, whenever you're looking at someone doing a costume, and they're not really up on 19th century dress, this is the first thing you'll notice that is off, is where
Uh,
the waistcoat, since it was developed, the idea of it, I will quickly show you. The idea of the waistcoat is that the trousers go underneath it.
yeah,
You'll see this thing with modern, so with 19th century trousers, they go right up to the belly button,
yep,
and
that's what
what
I
that
like.
also does is stop your shirt from flapping all over the place. So you'll
Yeah,
see modern three-piece suits. You'll see people, they'll have a belt and their trousers are fairly low down. And no matter
Ew.
what they do, they're constantly stuffing themselves back in
Yeah,
because
no,
the
it's not meant to be like
waistcoat is
that.
not
It's not
meant to
meant to
be
be
like
like that. No, it's not. That's what I lived, when I was looking at the Ritz. It just looked so perfect. Everything, the tailcoat where it was designed kind of matched with the way the waistcoat. But the waistcoat didn't like it. It went over the trousers, but the trousers are high waist enough for it not for your your shirt to just be popping out and showing a belt or something
especially
else.
when you're working all day and running about the place, you can't be having anything fun.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable and looking good and feeling good at the same time. So how is this working out the way they've modernized, trying to modernize costume for the sake of, I don't know, making excess costume or cheap costume or costume for theatre, whatever they try to do. Um,
It's such an odd little change. People, I think a lot of the time, people don't even realize. It's not something you notice until someone says, "No, look, it's
yeah,
different." Yeah. You're going to see it everywhere you go now.
I guess so. Yeah.
Another interesting thing about 19th century coats and jackets are shoulder pads. They don't have
Oh,
no shoulder.
you see?
And again, you'll see this with costumes. A lot of the time, they will put the shoulder pads in,
Shoulder
and
pads.
you'll get to a point where you actually start recognizing it and going, "Oh,
Ooh,
just it unbalances the suit so much." It's just because it's
really?
very natural on the shoulder.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting because I look at these the paintings on my page, some of them, having shoulder pads with like little lines coming down from it, and then some that are
Oh,
just
what,
completely,
the military ones?
yeah, the military ones, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So on the outside, yeah, that's fine, but they never used to put shoulder pads on the inside.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I'm learning something.
They said, "Oh
Well,
yeah."
no, I'm happy because again, like I'm a fashion enthusiast. So I'll just move on to asking you, like, when did you discover your, maybe I should introduce your illustrations. So, what exactly do you do illustrations about, and when did you discover your desire for art illustration?
Well, in terms of discovering my fascination with it, I think I was about 4 or 5, and yeah, I loved cartoons, and I was just constantly drawing all the cartoons that I was seeing. Um, this is a very long time ago now, so this is like the early '80s. So it was things like uh, you have to look
The
it up.
early 80s. Oh my
Hmm?
God.
Yeah, yeah. I've
Wow.
just turned 41, so there you go.
Oh, I never would have guessed. Oh my goodness. Wow,
Well,
how the Black community is getting younger and younger every time I see them.
you
Wow.
see, my man looks younger than I do.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
so
it's nice to see. I've never seen someone who's such a 19th century fashion enthusiast, and on the side, there's an illustration. When I came across your page, I never would have guessed that you even done illustrations, and so
the other way
so
around. I think the other way around. I'd say
oh,
that art, I think, is my main thing. It's something that
really?
I do as naturally as breathing. It's just because to me it's such an all-encompassing aspect of my life. It's almost invisible to me. It's something that I just do. So it's kind of hard for me to explain to other people. Yes, I spend most of my time illustrating. For me, a big part of it is that art is communication. It's trying to express and deliver a message of a particular worldview, emotion, thoughts, imagination, obsessions. It's a way of speaking without language, and it's something I've always done. And with my latest projects, it was bringing together a lot of my interests. I started a comic called The Brotherhood a few years ago, and that's, I think, really what led me to become very fascinated with 19th century dress. I'd always had a passing interest in it. But when I started learning about it and understanding how it all fit together, I just became more and more obsessed with it. And I started wanting to dress that way. And in a way, I kind of discovered myself through that. But my last project that I recently did was a coloring book. This was because I quit my job last year and was trying to look for just a simple way of making a bit of income. And my girlfriend suggested I do a coloring book. And just she said, do what you just do, whatever, do something you like. And I immediately started thinking, well, one of the things that drives me crazy when we're talking about the past is just the omission of people who are around today. There's this very prevalent idea that people who are marginalized today came out of nowhere, and it's a modern thing. You know, you
Yeah.
have people who are LGBTQ, you know, people who are trans, and there's this idea of, oh, they've just, it's a modern thing, you know, where do they come from? And I started just look, it was really easy as well. I just looked people up from the 19th
Yeah.
century.
And you can find that they've always been there.
They're always there. And this was a big thing. And for me, my idea was just, it wasn't going to be this huge in your face statement. It was just going to be quite simple, just to say, I call it Mr. Walters's coloring book of notable persons. And the idea
I
being, I
like
don't
that.
think they're notable. It's just, they are. Present them and say,
Yeah.
look, here they are. They existed. Yeah, and it was just, my idea is just that the people will see it and go, oh, we didn't just spring up out of nowhere. Oh, I'm not by myself. Oh, I'm not the only person who's ever felt like this,
Yeah.
um, who identifies as this. I'm not the only person in the world. We have been here. I am part of something, and I am part of the world. And that's basically what I was trying to do, just in a really low-key way. It's funny, I have had some backlash and some pushback on it, which I was
Yeah.
quite surprised, because just like,
Yeah,
oh, this
yeah,
is
which I think I picked up on. People had some strange things to say in regarding with race. How can you can't tell what race these people are? Like, what's the point of this book? And I'm like, are you supposed to tell what race they are? Is that the most important thing about, you know?
no. I think the most funny one I had was, oh, was it you're rewriting history? It's like,
What?
you know, the illustrations are taken from photos. So I was just
Oh my
thinking,
God.
do you
But
know if you,
yeah, that's
I'm not
I'm not
rewriting
surprised
history, I'm
anymore.
just telling you it.
I get a lot of similar comments that sometimes I'm rewriting history, whether it's meant to, as a good thing or a bad thing. But at the end of the day, what people need to realize is the kind of things I talk about, or if I'm referencing from a painting, these references actually exist. You know, there are painting references, there are historical archives of existing, you know, Black European figures or unpopular histories that are literally there. We're not trying to rewrite anything. We're just bringing to light the existing history that no one knows about. And that's the importance of this page. And that's the importance of you and your existence being here. It's like bringing to light, you know, histories and things that we find fascinating in history that's already existing. So for someone to comment and say, you're rewriting history, and
I think they're looking through this very small, very blinkered
tiny
sort
lens.
of period. Again, they're looking at the world in a post-slavery mindset,
Yeah, yeah,
looking
that's
at
the
the
thing.
world as saying,
That's the problem.
the theories and the beliefs of slavery were made up, and they were small, and they were just for one particular purpose. And
That's, yeah,
you hold on to that
to that.
so long afterwards, it's just let it go. It doesn't serve any purpose. Um, Learn about human history. Learn about the fact that it wasn't just Europe that defined us as a species. We are a species. We are one race.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, the idea that we're different races. If we were different
Uh,
races, we wouldn't be able to
I got that from someone
intervene.
as
It'd be
my Nigerian friend told me we are just one race with a human race, so why are these other races existing? So yeah, she
yeah,
told me.
it's a lie that has been told so often that people think that it's the absolute truth, and it's just no. And yeah, so this is what I was trying to do, is to there's also something that I discovered whilst I was researching for the Brotherhood comic. One of the big aspects of the comic, it's set mainly in the 19th century, but whilst I was researching, I also wanted to have an aspect of human history throughout the centuries, and that's sort of way back to when
Mhm.
we were still cavemen. And one of the things that sort of just really struck me was that people are always damn people. If you take a person from 199,000 years ago and stuck them over here, they are exactly the same.
Same. It's so
They are
true.
just people. And we need to learn that. And we need to also, this is why it's so important with what you're doing, which is like showing this history. They're showing, look, there are other people. There isn't just the
Yeah,
same.
and they just had normal lives. They owned farms, they had cattle, and they did normal things other than trying to abolish the slavery and fight the powers that be for the rest of their lives. You know, they lived, they had businesses, they
What, what,
invented stuff.
have you ever watched Schindler's List?
No, no, I
Watch
heard
it.
about it.
Absolutely recommend watching it. It is a brilliant film. But one of the things, I saw it once when I was a kid, and I saw it a few years, about 5 or 6 years ago. And one of the things that struck me, the absolute brilliance of the film, was that before everything kicks off, you're seeing the community, and there's guys who are just gangsters and crooks. There's guys who are just shopkeepers. There's guys who's just like this cheeky little boy. They're just all different people. And what was made the rest of the film so powerful is that these weren't just some suffering melange. They were humans. And that is what really brought it home. And I think that is a very important thing that needs to be reflected when we create and when we try and tell stories and when we try and share with each other, is to keep in mind that these are humans. They weren't saintly victims. They weren't monsters. They were human beings. I think
Yeah.
we need to hold on to that and keep telling that story.
Yes, that's so, so important. Um, um, I just think that we've covered most everything. We're almost out of time. I wanted to have a Q&A, maybe 10 minutes if people are interested. So guys, don't be afraid to ask questions. We are happy to answer everything. Don't be a stranger, ask away. Or if you just want to make a comment, that's fine. I think my final question that I personally wanted to know is, what is your methodology before creating or getting into a creative photo shoot of your costumes, which I've seen you post on your Instagram, which I've seen, or what is your methodology before illustration?
I think I'm gonna answer the illustration one first because that's slightly longer.
Yeah.
I do it in a really bad way. What will happen is I will just in my head will have a scene and I'll start playing with this scene. I don't know why it just pops into my head and I'll play with it. I'll write it. I'll write it. Say there's a man and he's walking down an alleyway and he's looking over his shoulder and he's being followed by someone. Who is he? Where's he come from? Where's he going? And I start working on that and I start saying, well, he's a lord. He is 80 years old. He's being chased by a group of people who are, they know he has a secret. And I just do all this in my head. I haven't
Yeah.
touched a piece of paper. I haven't done anything. I sit for days and days writing in my head. It is a terrible way of doing things because I have no space in my mind for anything else. I don't know people's names.
Oh,
I don't know what street I live on. But I can tell you about the characters I've created. I can tell you what their grandfather's names were, you know. And by the time I put pen to paper, I've got the whole story.
wow, that is a explosion of a way, but it's still a way. Everyone has the different creative and sometimes it just takes having the freedom to think, and just that freedom to think is very important for me, because a lot of my ideas just come from me just thinking, spending some time thinking, imagining and reconstructing things in my mind. But anything that is manifested onto paper, it all has started with an initial thought. So I think that's a very a relatable way that, like, me as an artist and a lot of artists can relate to. But yeah, that's that is the creative way. Other people are more, I guess, organized in their methodology. Some people like to I did an interview with Vashti earlier on today, and she does so many. She's a multidisciplinary author of a children's book, Little Leaders, and so she creates historical books for children, and she creates like these 3D models. And she does globe things. She does so many things with technology, with the science of things, and it's really interesting to see her working here and then going digital and then painting acrylic for the first time in a globe. She's a very explorative artist, and I think it's
I
so interesting.
understand where that comes from. I think it's because it's an expression of something that is internal. I think a lot of the times the medium that people work through is just the medium that is most expedient for them. I illustrate because that's the thing that I'm best at, and it's something that I can get the best results from. But
Yeah.
I'd imagine someone who is a multidisciplinarian and has that natural talent and developed those skills as
But
well.
she did say she found herself through illustration. Illustration was her final, even though she'd done these things, it was part of her process to the end goal of where she was going. Like for me, when I'm starting a painting, I don't just pick up a paint and say, I'm gonna, like some people can do that, but
Yeah,
I can't do that. For me, it starts the same way. It starts with thinking. It starts with the initial idea, spending lots of time thinking of ideas, thinking of different things, having the freedom to just, have opinions in your mind and just think and imagine. That's where it all starts, and then from there, it moves on to a photo shoot. Like you do photo shoots, I have the
yeah,
costume, I have these things, and I like to construct the lighting. For example, the angle of the lighting, the wind. What angle is the photograph taking? What kind of image am I trying to replicate from a historical era? And then from there, it goes to Photoshop manipulation. There's so many different processes before the final result, and everyone's process. Some people like just still life painting. It's a more authentic historical. Like for me, it's a lot of technology that's going into my process that would have never existed.
but I think it is the same conversation that every single artist has. Is that they have this vision, they have this, they can develop it, they can tweak it, they can move it around, but it exists inside their head. And then everything that follows afterwards is the artist chasing that vision that they've seen.
Exactly.
Which actually I think is an important aspect that we all have, I think, as human beings. It's actually one of the things that my comic touches on, which is the idea that human beings have an internal dialogue, and this is what has defined us since the very beginning. We discovered this spark. So part of the comic, it starts off with the idea of the Garden of Eden, and there's always a creation myth. There's always there's Prometheus, there is Hanuman, there is always this figure that comes and takes something from the gods and makes human beings humans. And to me, I think that is an allegory for us becoming self-aware, for having that discussion with ourselves. And all of it comes from that. Art comes from that discussion that we have with ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to remind artists of that, especially people who are watching. But this is an important process, just being able to think and how we are related in that way. That we all think, and then we have different ways of bringing our ideas together is really interesting. So now I will just bring up the Q&A for anyone who has any questions. But I mean, that is the end of it. I think we only went over by 5 minutes, so it's not as bad as because we started late, so I could just say.
Yeah,
But if anyone has any questions, don't be shy. I know there must be some
I'm
kind of
gonna come off one of the questions now. Yes, it is real.
Is it?
Yeah, I grew it myself.
Oh my days, there's been so many comments that I haven't been looking through this whole live. Oh my days. I'm so sorry. I apologize to everyone. Oh my gosh. Okay. Have you been seeing the comments, Marcus? Because I haven't been looking.
I haven't seen many comments. I've just like I don't think I'm seeing the
Yeah.
same ones anymore.
Some people are saying fantastic. I really enjoyed the listening and learning. I'm just trying to see if there's any questions in between because I was not
There's
looking.
something about
Why does Instagram?
what books you're reading.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been really bad for reading books. I don't know what happened. I used to be able to read like a book a week, and now I can hardly focus. I have been recently reading Vanity Fair. I randomly found a copy out on the street from like the 1930s. It's this massive thing. So I've been making my way through that. It's fascinating because there are black people in it. It's amazing. They're just there. It's normal.
It's there, it's just casually, just normally.
Yeah, so
Not
all
thinking,
the people complain about black people in a Vanity Fair adaptation, they can know actually you can take it up with Thackeray. So
someone asked before, are you familiar with J.A. Rogers?
no, who are they?
Rogers, that's an interesting one. No, we're not familiar. Enlighten us if you're still on the live. Someone asked what's the topic before. I didn't actually, if only I'd saw the comment before. The topic was introducing Marcus Anthony Rogers, mainly just about illustration, about art, about lifestyle. But
That's is there anything I do along with dressing of this time? Was there anything you tried to practice that was done in a past time? Kind of. Oh, actually, I've been. So my girlfriend is an avid dancer, and she has been teaching me to waltz. So I've been learning how to dance. So that's been a new one for me.
that's
She's been teaching all the
interesting.
versions as well. So that's been quite nice. Actually, we went to a ball this year, which was my first one. So it was a lovely sort of social.
And I'm not invited to the ball.
I didn't know you. It was like there's another one I think soon. Bath. I can send you the links to the person who organises it all. It's a lovely little.
Yeah, I'll have to get my costume ready then. I'll have to get my nice ball gown, my
You,
nice
it was.
French
You
Louis.
would fit right in. You would fit right in. Honest.
Oh my gosh! But I really want to be. I want to wear like the men's costume and maybe have like a little spectacle. Maybe it'll be like more 19th century.
I've got a good line on those. Yeah.
Really?
I'm wearing my contact lenses, so I've not actually been wearing these today.
Oh,
I do normally wear them around the house, but I've got my contact lenses in today, so I don't need them just now.
oh my goodness, you just have it all. You're just prepared. You see, we have to do interviews in the future because I need to see more costumes. I haven't seen much. Like when I saw you on Greenwich, I want to see like more of that. I want to see what I see on your Instagram. So for everyone who's on here, do check out Marcus Rogers' Instagram. Look at his feed. Look at the content. The different kinds of tailcoats and waistcoats and different kinds of cravats and the style you wear. You could see the different hats and everything. Do check that out. But someone said you have a natural. Oh, it's I recognize you, Burrow Line Sis.
Berenices?
Yeah, yeah. I reckon. Oh, thank you. You have come to the next one. I will come to the next one. I will. I will come to the next ball with you guys. I can't wait. Oh, but thank you everyone who's on here. I really appreciate this time. This link is going to get shouted out. If you want a copy of this video, I can get that sent to you via email. I'm also planning to. This is part of the series that I'm doing, just interviewing creative artists to critically respond, to the themes of art history mainly, because that's the thing I'm trying to go for. Because it's easy to find, black artists who do anything but I'm trying to close it down to a niche of people who critically and specifically focus on art history. It's not as easy to find those artists. So I'm glad I found you. I'm glad I found Vashti. I'm looking. I have many more lined up, and yeah, I can't wait to get this series on the
I,
road.
I would say if you're talking to 18th century dress or well, early 19th century dress, a great person to speak to is Edward Price.
Edward Price, please get me in contact with him because I'm trying to interview as many as possible now. But thank you everyone for joining. This is the end now.
Thank you for having
But if you have any more questions, I'm going to be posting this on my page. You can just ask in the comments, or you can just comment if you have any comments there.